Welcome to Daily 5 for Wednesday, December 13th, 2023. You have likely seen news stories because I've seen them all over the place, whether it's been on technology blogs or the actual, mainstream news outlets. It's been everywhere that podcasting as a business is not doing all that well right now. I think the most recent large-scale layoffs were from Spotify, which has been basically downsizing its podcasting efforts, or whatever you want to call them. They're just the latest in a number of companies that are either dumping their podcast divisions entirely, or they are drastically reducing their spend and their teams on it. There's been any number of companies that have been doing this. And that has also affected smaller outlets, smaller places like Twit.tv, which I've been a fan of and a supporter of for a while now, who recently had to lay off 3 of their team members, which is a not insignificant number of people, because the ad market for podcasting has dried up unless you are a podcaster that is willing to give over every single bit of your listeners' information to ad companies, which Twit is not willing to do. One of the reasons I like them is they respect their users' privacy. So a lot of people have kind of been lamenting this. There's some articles saying about, that this is the podcast bubble is bursting. And, it's not really a surprise. This is something that, much like the PC market, although there's a little more to it in this case, it blew up during the pandemic because people in many countries were stuck at home. And so naturally, podcast listenership went up. And as is often the case, without any regard to the quality of the product, a number of companies decided, we have found a new hot market. Let's dump money and talent into it, and we'll just exploit the fact that people are into this thing right now. And what you saw a flood of, and there still are many of these, are shows that are basically the same thing in terms of, there's different segments of it, but one big one that I really can't stand is celebrities interviewing celebrities. Oh, goody. Something where the shows all have the basic same template format, where it's people who are in the music or film or TV industry, and they are talking to other people in the music or TV or film industry, and they're all telling the same stories, promoting the same things over and over and over, ad infinitum, if that's how you pronounce it, but endlessly, to say it in English. And it's something where as soon as you hear one of these things, you've heard them all. And you can pretty much tell right away when a show is going to be like that. And generally, they are shows that are only a few years old. Now, that's not me saying that every podcast in the last couple of years is bad. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But there is definitely a copycat or a cut and paste feeling to many of these quote-unquote high-profile podcasts that have launched, where it is, again, somebody whose name you know interviewing somebody else whose name you know. And, gee whiz, if you listen to a couple of these, especially when you notice that the same people show up on all of them, you will detect that the same stories are being told, or variations thereof. Certain things, of course, will change. If somebody worked with somebody else on one particular show, then that may not be what they talk about on the other show, but somehow they'll have stories about their time working together, and it's boring. You kind of get through it all very quickly. My wife and I listened to these for a while, and we kept bouncing around throughout different ones, and we generally were trying to listen to shows where people we liked appeared, but even that really kind of faded quickly, because even there, most of the people, their stories kind of became repetitive. And even if they were interesting people, they sort of get the same questions. They're all very safe. They're all very contained within this box where no one wants to say anything that might get them some kind of publicity other than positive. And so they're very toothless. They really just come off as lightweight, if not very heavy, promotional materials for whoever the guest is. And this was something you saw everywhere. And even within podcast networks, they would start cannibalizing their own content, where you would just hear promos for shows and you would sit there and think, well, isn't that a lot like the show I'm listening to now, just with a different person's voice involved? Can that really last? And of course, no, it couldn't. None of this is a surprise. Artificial inflation because of a worldwide pandemic, coupled with the fact that many of these shows had next to no imagination, and people are shocked that the bottom fell out? Of course it did. I mean, you're seeing this everywhere. There's a lot of things that are being affected by this, and a lot of them come down to the same basic idea that people weren't really charging enough for the material that was actually good. And in other cases, without the ability to suck every morsel of information about the person that is subscribing to whatever show it is, advertisers lost interest because the product stopped being unique and interesting. So I'm not shocked by any of this. Of course, podcasting is going to survive it. It's going to look probably a lot different, but honestly, anybody paying close attention could have seen that this was inevitable later.